AI is continuing to improve and improving at rapid fire pace, but it's continuing to improve with an idea of trying to ultimately replicate the human experience of how humans ask for information. So that really means that AI is going to be looking at intent and attribute. So you want to think about how you are communicating about yourself on your website and on other places online, because that's where you're going to be found by ChatGPT when it recommends you or someone else for the service. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where on today's episode, we are going to talk about how to get found on ChatGPT. All right. So this is a topic that came out of a recent comment on one of our other podcasts. So for those of you that have been following us for a while, you know that the podcast is on all the platforms, but in particular, we are growing on YouTube. And so if you are finding us on YouTube, you have the ability to leave us comments on YouTube. And that is something that we check regularly. So for the opportunity to actually engage, learn, ask questions, by all means, please follow us on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, like and share the episodes that you find valuable. And that is how we are ultimately going to be able to provide this information, not just to you, but to other lawyers like you who are growing and scaling your law firms. So this week, we had a comment that came through. Rather, I should say very recently, we had a comment that came through, and we decided that this week we're going to do a episode to deal with it, where someone specifically said they wanted to know more about the tools of AI. And this person actually, shout out to you. I won't say the person's name because I just don't like to call folks out. But the person actually said, I really would like to hear more about how lawyers are using AI in areas like legal research. And of course, many of you know, most of you know, I'm sure by now, that I'm a licensed attorney in the lovely state of New Jersey. And I run my law firm in New Jersey, as I am also coaching lawyers from around the country and actually in several countries on the business principles that will help you to grow and scale a sustainable law firm. However, I have not only experience with what my clients are doing and of course what the industry is teaching, but also of course of what I am personally doing. And so there are a lot of things that I could speak to, and including things like legal research. But in this particular area of the world, in our wonderful law firm mentor world, we really focus on business growth. So there are, of course, things that are relevant to that deal with the practice of law, how to do it ethically, how to use your authority as a lawyer to be able to attract more business. But that's not really a focal point. And so originally my thought was, that's not something we really cover. But then I started thinking about it and I said, if you're able to create more efficiency through getting better legal research tools, that absolutely can be relevant to the ability for you to gain economies of scale, to be more profitable in your law firm, et cetera. So we are actually going to do a tour, if you will, of some of the tech tools, in particular the AI tools that are revolutionizing the practice of law. So that is coming up, but that is not today. Today, we're going to talk about one very specific tool. And actually, I shouldn't say one very specific tool. There's three of them that are most relevant to today's discussion. We're going to talk about ChatGPT, but also Gemini and Copilot. And for those of you that don't know, these are the AI-based tools that are affiliated with Microsoft and Google. And then, of course, OpenAI is its own company. And the reason why I wanted to go into this topic today is that a lot of law firms are now struggling with digital marketing, ironically, because they have done such a great job at learning digital marketing for Google, right? Google is the largest search engine that exists. YouTube is the second largest, and it is, of course, owned by Google. So a lot of people game the system of what to put online, how to talk in search engine speak, right? We have a whole industry, search engine optimization, where people are really trying to figure out what is the way that they should structure their websites, what should they be doing with content in order to be found and ranked highly by search engines. Not saying that that is a bad strategy, by the way. Certainly not recommending that you abandon that strategy. But now, with the advent of artificial intelligence and the way that it is really rapid fire taking over so many industries. In fact, harming certain industries, certain people, certain professionals are no longer really deemed as necessary because of AI, and really helping a lot of industries, including the legal industry. So a lot of lawyers want to use this tool, and they know that their clients are using this tool. But what happens when the way that you might speak when you are trying to optimize for search engines doesn't necessarily resonate with the way that you should speak if you want to be found by your AI tools? And so I want to talk a little bit today. I mean, this is not this is what you should be doing one versus the other, right? There are integrated strategies, and you really have to come up with a comprehensive marketing plan and be having a foot in both worlds until you figure out the world that is going to best suit you in terms of getting the volume and the type of clients that you want. But you have to understand that the way that you communicate for a search engine is not the same as the way that you communicate for AI. And the best way to understand that is to understand how AI thinks. So I'm going to give you some strategies and some characteristics of how AI thinks and finds information and uses information that's different than search engines to kind of help put some layers to this conversation. So the first thing you have to understand is that AI tools rely upon structured public data. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, when we talk about public data, you have to think about the fact that you're really talking about data that is chunked in a way that machines can easily interpret it, okay? Different than the way a human might interpret it. So think about things like your Google business profile, your LinkedIn job titles and bios, legal directories like Avvo and Martindale Hubbell and Super Lawyers, your law firm websites that are properly, that have a proper schema markup, right? These are chunks of information that the AI tool can read that are easily digestible so that it is taking in the information and it is cataloging it, if you will, into valuable versus not valuable. This information relates to this problem that a person is searching for versus these words are something that a person put into a search engine. Okay. And this matters really because you have to keep in mind that your online presence now has to be much more multifaceted than it had to be in the past. In the past, as long as you had the keywords, you could just keyword the hell out of your website and people could find you on your website, right? They'd search the words, your words would be voluminous on your website, and you would be one of the top picks recommended by a search engine. With AI, they're not just looking at one location, they're looking at multiple locations, and they're looking at chunks of information that relate to each other. Okay. Now, this is going to come up again when we talk about other ways that AI processes information, but that is one of the key things that you have to keep in mind. The second key area that is a little bit different. Now, there is some overlap here between search engine optimization and AI optimization. But one of the areas that is a key area of overlap is using natural language. Okay. Now, when we talk about natural language, we're also talking about interpretation prompts. Okay. So if somebody were to go online today and search for your type of law, right? They need an attorney who does what you do. They're probably not going to say, I'm looking for Smith County divorce lawyer or Jonesboro criminal defense lawyer, right? That is how search engines find you, because search engines are looking for the location where you are, and they are looking for the type of law as two of the key drivers of information for them, right? So as soon as you get those two hits, and you get those two hits frequently, that's the reason why you go onto websites and every heading says Jonesboro criminal defense lawyer or Jonesboro DWI lawyer, right? You have that county location over and over and over again, because the volume of those words is going to help a search engine say, yeah, this person is in this location and they practice in the area of law that the person needs, right? So you're going to be very popular to a search engine for that. For AI, not so much, right? They're going to be more focused on what the person asks for. So if a person goes online, they are probably not just going to ask for the location of the attorney and the practice area. They're probably going to describe the type of lawyer they want, right? Or they might even ask AI, right? A lot of times they don't say, this is what I want. They say, I'm a person who deals with X, Y, and Z. And for a lot of people now, they are using AI. They are using ChatGPT as their source to gather information. So rather than go to Google and say, I'm having a business problem of XYZ, they will go to ChatGPT. Or instead of going to Google and saying, I'm struggling with a medical problem of ABC, they'll go to ChatGPT as a kickstart. Now, I hope there are a lot of people, unfortunately, that are just going to AI and leaving it there. Of course, we know that AI can make mistakes because it's indexing information and all of that information is not accurate. So it can make mistakes, but a lot of people will at least go there to kind of get a catalog of the websites they should be going to, the information they should be searching. So a person's going to come online and say, based on everything you know about me, ChatGPT, what would you say would be the best type of criminal defense lawyer for me? Or who would best be suited to help me kickstart my trademarks, my trademarking of different assets? Or, I'm looking for someone to help me sell my house. And I know I have to have a realtor. At some point, I'm going to have an attorney. What type of an attorney would you recommend? And oftentimes, based on what already has been fed into ChatGPT, it will have an understanding at a preliminary level of the person and then start giving the person prompts, right? I would suggest that you might be a kind of person that needs an aggressive attorney, or you might need an attorney who has a good bedside manner, right? So if the person goes into ChatGPT and says, hey, I'm looking for an attorney who does X, who has a good bedside manner, well, you probably don't have bedside manner on your website, right? That's not how you were taught your website should be built. And best practices based on search engine optimization, you built accordingly. You did not build for how a person might be asking about how to find a lawyer, with a friend over brunch. And AI is continuing to improve, right? And improving at rapid fire pace, but it's continuing to improve with an idea of trying to ultimately replicate the human experience. So how humans ask for information. So that really means that AI is going to be looking at intent and attributes, right? So you want to think about how you are communicating about yourself on your website and on other places online, because that's where you're going to be found by ChatGPT when it recommends you or someone else for the service. You have to also keep in mind that AI searches the internal knowledge base, right? So they are looking for all of the information. They're looking at directories. They are looking at articles. They're looking at reviews. And we're going to talk a lot about reviews in just a moment. But they're going to return a recommendation based on how closely someone matches the attributes that the individual that is now known to ChatGPT is going to fit with. And so you have to think about that when you are stacking the deck with a whole bunch of words that don't really describe you other than describing where you're located, or using some standard catchphrases when you talk about victory, when you talk about success, when you talk about outcomes. Those are not necessarily what an individual might be talking about. That might be what they want, but that might not be the words that they use or how they describe what they're looking for. The other thing that we have to keep in mind, this is kind of the third key differentiator of how AI versus search engines look at information, is that they are looking for authority and relevance. Okay. They're trying to weigh your authoritativeness. Now, search engines do this as well, but AI is going to be looking at the overarching authority that you convey by virtue of what you have out there, right? So you want to think about how frequently others think of you as authoritative, not just how frequently you are saying you are authoritative in the various spaces. But this is where backlinks are critical, right? Because if you are named on other people's websites, so that's things like podcast guesting, right? If you have appeared on 15 podcasts over the last year talking about your practice area, if you've written 7 or 8 articles that are cited on other people's websites, that is going to show that you are more authoritative. right? So this is where you can actually use relationships, okay? For those of you that say, kind of old networking is dead, this is definitely an area where if you are a natural networker, you have a leg up here, right? Call the people that you are connected with and do some cross marketing. And this is an opportunity for you and for them, right? If you are in the healthcare space, then you probably want to have people who are making referrals to doctors, to nurse practitioners, to specialists, to homeopathic, to naturopathic doctors. You want to have those types of websites listing your articles, right? Giving you the credibility and the authority that is going to make you appear to ChatGPT as someone who is a noted authority. Because most people, again, are not going to go into a search engine or an AI search and say, I'm looking for a high authority attorney, right? Most people don't even know that phrase. They're thinking about, I want somebody who's the big guns, right? Or I want somebody who is known and who has a great reputation, or somebody who can be trusted with my case. And that will be presumed by virtue of you being trusted by peers and professional colleagues who are going to presumably refer you or who would be inclined to refer you. So you want to be thinking about things that you can do that can boost your visibility, right? This is where reviews come in pretty significantly. Okay. So the more often you are reviewed, and in particular, the more recently you have been reviewed, the more authoritative your review is going to appear. So when AI is searching and scanning the internet and looking for what's out there about you, they're not just looking for, does the person have positive reviews? They're looking for, was your last review 5 months ago or was your last review 5 years ago, right? Ideally, this is where the old strategy of frequency of posting on search engines is really important. Right. Remember, once upon a time, Google has, they changed their algorithm. I don't want to say all the time, but certainly frequently enough that marketers who are in the know would always advise clients, you need to be up on either short form content that you're pumping out on a regular basis, right? So instead of writing one long article, you want to write a long article that we can break into 15 pieces. So we have a piece of content that can go out most business days of a month. That was a different strategy than writing long form content because authority was most important. So in a similar way, AI is doing that same type of dance, but it's a little different in the sense that they're looking at what is right now indicating high authority, right? Not just what indicates it based on volume, but how recent is the information that we're getting. And then of that information that we're getting, how positive is it? So you want to have those positive reviews going out, but you don't want to have it all go out at once, right? You would want to be able to consistently show frequency of high quality information going out, right? And again, you want to be thinking about things that are going to yield authority. So FAQ videos, guesting on someone else's podcast, having your own podcast. Absolutely another way to do that, right? Legal guides. If you are, writing ebooks or white papers on how to, whether it's gated content or not, right? Now, of course, if it's gated content, the internet may not be able, or an AI search may not be able to pull it up. So you at least want to have the title and perhaps a little snippet of what it's about accessible if you are going to have it as gated content that someone has to exchange their email address to get the full document. But again, frequency and recency, very important. Now, the next thing that we have to keep in mind about AI that's a little bit different than search engine optimization is that they pull from multimodal sources of information. So what does that mean? So that means essentially it used to be the case that words that were on whatever platforms, whether they were on your website, if there was a backlink, there might be an article on somebody else's website. The words were what mattered. That was what you were trying to figure out, which is the reason why you could outsource to a third party. Oh yeah, John, the ghostwriter, is writing my website copy and writing my social media posts. We've talked before about the fact that the only social media platform that is indexable by search engines is LinkedIn, right? So I've got a marketer writing my LinkedIn post. I've got a marketer writing my copy for my website. That used to be all that was needed in order to get the proliferation of content that was required for a search engine. Well, with AI, it's not just pulling information that's written. It's pulling from a variety of different sources. It's also able to listen and read your voice, right? Or pull your voice. So it detects your voice. It's able to pull from transcripts. It's able to pull from pictures, right? So you can load a picture of yourself into ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot, and be able to pull similar images that are accessible in other places on the internet. So when you think about how many places you've appeared online, those various different sources really start to stack up. And what that tells AI is that this is not just a person who has written something. This is a person who is a prolific source of information about whatever the practice area is online. So if somebody comes to an AI search and says, I need a lawyer who's the authority or the biggest name in the biz about X. Well, you're being out speaking, being out writing, cited in the media, having appeared on podcasts. That's going to add more credence than somebody who just has a lot of written content, even if it's the same volume of content, right? So you want to think about where are you appearing online and how diverse are your different buckets for purposes of marketing, right? So if you've published a YouTube video about a subject matter, and then you were a guest on a podcast, and then you also you had a well-tagged blog article, and you also have your website has a schema markup that shows that authority. Those platforms are going to connect the dots for AI, right? So it's going to be able to say, this is not just somebody who does the thing, but this is somebody who lives, breathes, eats, sleeps the thing, right? That omnipresence that we've talked about in marketing, which is important for purposes of search engines, but it becomes more integrated. It becomes a deeper analysis at the AI level than a search engine, because a search engine is, again, just pulling words, right? It's pulling content and saying based on where the person is, what they've searched for, that you provide the service, and then, all the different factors that go into how high you are on the search, how frequently you are posting, how much content there is, how many relevant keywords there are. AI does a little bit deeper of analysis. It really looks more at you holistically as a person. Now, here is the key. This is the final thing that I want to share with you about AI and how it varies slightly from search engine optimization. So AI search is going to simulate human decision making, but it's not human. So what do I mean by that, right? They're going to prioritize recommendations that match emotional and practical needs. So remember, a few moments ago, we were just talking about the idea that if somebody goes in to a search in ChatGPT, that person may or may not say, I'm looking for a person with A, B, C, D, E, F, G characteristics as my lawyer. Oftentimes, that person has engaged with ChatGPT before the search for a lawyer. So whatever they've been talking about, ChatGPT has already started to gather information about preferences, about priorities, about personality styles, right? And oftentimes when a person goes looking for a lawyer, they may not say, I want somebody who fits my personality, but that's ultimately what they want, right? We all know that there are plenty of times where lawyers will say they could not, quote, close a client because they just didn't connect, right? The person had a difficult personality, or they just energetically, they weren't aligned. Sometimes you'll just not even know what the reason is, but there just doesn't feel like there's a right fit there. Well, we all have had that experience, right? Where you're hearing all the right things. The professional you're speaking to may feel very intelligent. He or she may be presenting all the information that you need. You may say, yeah, intellectually, I don't have a reason to say no, but something just feels off, right? It's the same thing when a prospect is hiring a lawyer. The only difference is it feels even more high stakes than with other types of purchases because this is a relationship that they are walking into. And so they oftentimes won't say, I need somebody who will listen to me and make me feel heard, or I need someone who will validate what my perspective is. That's not typically what people are asking for in consultations, but that's definitely what they want. And so ChatGPT is listening, learning a person, and then trying to make a recommendation for that person, which means things like emotional needs really do take a much bigger part to play in it because that's something that they're not likely searching for. It's something that's being fed to them based on who they are and how they're showing up in their interactions with ChatGPT. So sometimes when a person goes in and does a search, they will kind of open the door and ask ChatGPT to walk through. So that means they might say, who is a good lawyer for me who handles this type of area if I have these following concerns, right? If I'm concerned about the price, if I'm concerned about how fast it happens, if I'm concerned about it being convenient to my home so that I don't have a long distance commute because I'm a single parent and I've got to get my kids after school, right? Whatever they're feeding to the search engine or to the ChatGPT, they're ultimately going to get some type of global feedback. And then you have to think about what you are putting out, because even if you are not saying the words that the person is asking for, they are interpreting your words to fit the person. So this is where we start talking about how ChatGPT is next level beyond search on Google. Because if a person comes in and says, I'm terrified I'm going to get demolished by my ex in divorce, she's brutal. She's just going to rip me apart and is threatening to take my kids away from me. You've got to help find me somebody who knows how to deal with that type of narcissistic personality, right? Divorce lawyer joke. Every third litigant is going to say that they're married to a narcissist, even though narcissists are about 1% to 2% of the population of humans. They are about 50% of the alleged litigants in divorce, according to most divorce litigants. But anyway, putting that aside for a moment, that's one of those things where ChatGPT is again trying to interpret. It's not just giving you what you're asking for. It's giving you what you are identifying you need, but also what it perceives you need based on the things that you're talking about. So this is where client reviews take on much greater significance, okay? Because again, when ChatGPT is trying to interpret information, it is interpreting the information based on who the person is that's searching. So if your reviews are multi-layered, right? And by multi-layered, we mean that your reviews don't just all say that you're aggressive in court, right? You want people to speak to their personal experience because the more diverse your client pool is, the more they're going to be able to identify things that matter to them that might not be consistent with what you think is great about you. In fact, I think all of us should at some point in time, if you haven't already done this, go through the experience of actually auditing your clients. And I don't mean like a global long survey that's going to have people kind of roll their eyes and say, I don't have time for a survey. I mean, literally just the next time you are talking to each one of your clients, just say, here are 5 words. Tell me which of these most resonates with you about how I am as a lawyer. Aggressive, intelligent, thorough, precise, whatever your words are, and have them pick. Okay. It can be that simple. It can literally be a 30-second question and however long they need to answer. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that that's where you stop, but I'm suggesting to you that if you start to get some global feedback and it's in different categories, then when you are soliciting reviews, you don't tell your client what to say, but if they've given you feedback in the past, and presumably you should be talking to them as you are representing them, if they're telling you what's working for them, what feels good to them, what they appreciate about you, even if they don't appreciate having to need a lawyer, right? Because most people are seeing a lawyer when something's wrong, right? But they appreciate the fact that you are good at a certain thing. then you can prompt them when you are asking for reviews. Remember the conversation we had when you talked about how comforted you felt when I explained to you all of the variables, or when I gave you the pricing information very matter-of-factly, or when I was willing to and able to handle the emotional response of your spouse when you just needed just the facts, ma'am, right? It was a difficult conversation. You said I navigated that well. Remember that? Okay, so I want you to talk about that when you give a review. That's how you give a person's words back to them and then orient them to what you want them to talk about without telling them what to say, right? And so in doing that, one of the things that helps, particularly with AI, is that, again, people are going to use words that matter to them. And the more diverse that pool of opportunity is, right, there can be a whole host of different explanations that people give that could all lead to the same conclusion. So you might have 5 separate reviews, 5 separate clients that speak to the experience, but all of them are saying in a matter-of-fact sort of way, in their own way, that you were zealous, right? It could be one of them is saying, oh, he just wouldn't stop talking in court no matter how much the other attorney kept interrupting. Another review might be, every letter we got from the other attorney, he just ripped him to shreds. He just went at him, wouldn't back down, kept going, right? So different words, again, right? Slightly different than the first person. And then the next review, and then the next review, and the next review. Well, if all those reviews are published and AI reads it, it's going to read that as this person is tenacious. So if the person who is doing the search says, I need somebody who won't back down, or I need somebody who has a backbone. Even though the word backbone might not have been used in any of your reviews, it's going to fit the request, right? So, because again, it's not about the words, it's about the intent. It's about what is the person really seeking, both what is stated and not stated, what's implied, and what can you deliver that's consistent with that. The last thing I want to note here is ultimately what you are really trying to do when you are writing content and creating a marketing plan. Okay. This is not just about your website. This is about how you show up online, right? Think about the fact that you need to be everywhere. And everywhere sounds very intimidating, but really all that it means is that you need to be doing a little bit of everything in a way that creates a cohesive picture of you, so that there is enough information out and about you so that AI can read it and interpret what the universe, both you and others saying things about you, are communicating would fit the needs of the person that's searching. So a little bit different than search engines, not completely distinct. There are some overlaps, but it's distinct enough that I thought we should take some time to talk about it. Now, the last thing I will give to you, for those of you that are still with us, because I know that attention span that we have is always getting shorter, but I do want to commend those of you that are listening all the way to the end and remind you that the Law Firm Mentor Marketing and Sales Summit is coming up. We are very close to September. We have our Marketing and Sales Summit, and it's in New Orleans, Louisiana this year. So you definitely want to check that out. If you want to learn more, visit us at events.lawfirmmentor.net, and you can learn all about that retreat coming up. And I will look forward to seeing you on our next episode.